Hey guys, so for 325 we're getting some new blight anoints. These are special anoints, they don't appear anywhere on the tree or anything. And one of them is Vine Spike Cordial. And what this does is you inflict a Grasping Vine on hit while you have a Life Flask on. And Grasping Vines on hit means that it basically enables Inextricable Fate. And what this does is that all damage poisons when you have 3 or more stacks on an enemy. And this lets us drop Original Sin. It also lets us drop Chance to Poison and all that stuff. So this lets us do a very much cheaper setup of this build for the pretty much same value, same power, all that stuff. It's a little bit worse than Original Sin in that the playstyle might be a little slow in that you have to have 3 stacks of this Grasping Vine debuff on an enemy before you can actually damage them. And for this, I think this build might be pretty bad for mapping, but I think it's going to be one of the best farmers for simulacrums and T17s and ultimatum and all those things, right? In this current setup I'm running, I'm at 90 max res, 75 chaos res, max spell suppression, max hits of over 130,000 for all elements, and this is without wherever I have steel skin. So with steel skin we're at 175. I'm at 36 million DPS. This is dot cap, and then you can see if I do like 25% less damage, I'm still at dot cap. So this current setup is way overkill. But yeah, it's got pretty good life regen. It's got 2600 life leech slash on hit rate. This is from life gain on hit. The life regen's mostly from rational doctrine. Yeah, it's really good build. So this build guide, it's not really build guide, I guess it's gonna go over all the intricacies and all the stuff. I'll include some crafting stuff at the end, and then links below. I'm gonna try to stream more often, so if anyone's interested in that, come give me a follow. I'd really appreciate it. And then there's also a Discord link if you have any like more, I don't know, questions and all that stuff. You can put POBs in that Discord and I'll look at them if you want me to. So a few things come to mind when we're using these new boots, right? They read all damage can poison, or all damage inflicts poison rather. And what this does is we don't even need to get poison chance on the tree. We don't need to convert to chaos. So that opens up a ton of possibilities. Because we don't need to convert to chaos, we don't need original sin, which means we get a second ring. And that gives us a ton of damage, right? Rings are really, really good for this build. And then also, we don't have to run chance to poison anywhere, which lets us run a better quiver and drop some chance on the tree, which I'll go into in a little bit. But effectively, we're running the same 2 core items. We're running a Widow Hail, and we're running a good quiver with Pierce. And this quiver, effectively we want the proj speed, because proj speed is insane for Spark. The build will feel like absolute shit without it, and that is mandatory. So you need a feathered arrow quiver, and then you need the proj speed. I recommend Essence. If you can't get it, that's fine, just get T1. But that is guaranteed, like, you need that. This is the reason why this build feels so good. Another core item that comes back into play, because we can run, we don't need to run Volker's Guidance, right, for the other cheaper setup, is Soul Ascension. We can run this, and what these do is at max ramp, they give us 250% increased cast speed, which makes the build feel awesome as well. You can see my cast rate is around 12. Now, as you can see, this build requires Mage Blood, but it does not require Progenesis, and there's a few other ways you can make it cheaper, which I'll go into in a little bit. I have a full notes section here on how to cut costs and all that, which I'll explain. But yeah, it's using the same 2 core items, this quiver and all that stuff. So I'll just go over all the gear pieces now. So it's still Pathfinder, and we're running Wither on hit and all that stuff. And you can see that we have 12 casts per second and a ton of projectiles. So we have max Wither stacks at all points. We have huge life gain on hit for huge recovery, and all that stuff. For Pathfinder defenses, we're running Lightning Coil for Facetank and As. Unfortunately, we lost some sources on the helmet this patch, but that's okay. Our Fizz max hit's still more than enough. You can still tank Uber Shaper with this. It's not enough for some crazy like Valdos maps, but I don't think you're gonna run those on this build. But yeah, this is still enough for like Uber Shaper and all that stuff. So yeah, Lightning Coil. For the helmet, we're just running +2 max res on the implicit, and then 10 armor, res, and life. This helmet's pretty easy to make. The one thing that you'll see is the +2 AoE prefix. And what this is used for is Period of Lightning. Because we don't have any other sources of plus gem levels, we have to get +2 on the prefix. And this is pretty expensive nowadays, but honestly, this is one of the last upgrades that you'll need to worry about, because this is just going from 89 to 90 max res. So if you don't have the money for this, don't worry about it. Next, Soul Ascension, I kind of went over these, but they're basically for maximum cast speed, and on the implicits, we can either run Despair or Temp Chains, and then run the other one in Links. Worst case, you don't have either of these, and you have to drop like Blood Rage for Frenzy charges to run both. I'll go over the gems in a little bit. Boots, Inextricable Fate, we're running all damage inflicts poison with these, and we're running +1 max endurance charges. Now, one thing to consider with the setup is that it's probably going to be pretty bad for mapping. I can't test it right now because we don't have access to the new Anoint, and I can't show you what it'll play like because we don't have access to that. But effectively, it's going to be pretty bad for like general mapping, whatever, like speed mapping. It'll be fantastic for T17s, and it'll be fantastic for Simulacrums, Ultimatum, anything, even Delve. This build's probably like 2k to 3k Delve viable if you want to do that. In SSF, I've taken it to 1.5k so far, and it's been, just a breeze. So we're also getting a little bit of a buff with the endurance charges. So right now I have +1 max endurance charges corrupted on these boots. And yeah, that's giving us 16% LE damage reduction, and we're sustaining endurance charges via enduring composure on the tree. Next, we have two rings, or no, we have the amulet. So right now I have Defiance of Destiny spec'd in. I think this is still worth it, but if you can't run this, you're just going to want to run a rare amulet, to be honest, and you're just going to want to get +1 max gems, or, +1 to all skill levels of all gems. And if you get that, you can just run +1 AoE crafted on the helmet from 90 max res. And then you want resistances on the ring, and you want life, and ideally you want minus mana cost. And honestly, that's very cheap, going to be very cheap compared to what Defiance of Destiny used to be. So if you can get that, that's fantastic. And then you're going to want a strength and intelligence base. For the two rings, this is where it gets a little bit complicated with mana cost. There's so many different setups that are viable. The problem is it depends on your budget. So I have a whole bunch of notes on this, but effectively right now I have both rings with minus mana cost of skills. So I'm running 1 Vermilion with cast speed, recoup, max life, minus mana cost, and damage over time multiplier. And the other one is a helical ring with fracture dot multi, strength and intelligence, cast speed, recoup, and minus mana cost. Different solutions, you can run 2 helicals, you can run 2 Vermilions. I'm going to get into this later, but the Watcher's Eye, right now I think I just have a GG one on, but the only guaranteed mod that you really need right now is the non-channeling, might have minus mana cost right now. So if you were to drop the life gain on hit, which by the way is a required mod, you need to have that somewhere on the build. If you were to drop the life gain on hit with Vitality on the Watcher's Eye, you would need to run this other Vermilion ring, which has life gain on hit with spells from Shaper. And of course, you can make this easier to craft with just like pristine fossil spam. If you were to drop like the fracture damage over time multiplier, there's tons of ways to make this cheaper. But as I said, I'll get into that. And then Mage Blood is required, unfortunately, for max res, for all that stuff. I'm sure someone could cook up a build with Tides to Time, and I'm sure it'd be fully viable, but for this setup, I'm just saying Mage Blood's required because there's so many different things that it helps with. Alright, for Flasks, our first one we're running is an Enduring Hollowed Hybrid Flask. Unfortunately, we need to sustain a Life Flask on this build now. If you're not running Original Sin, and that's the main difference, you're going to be spamming, 1 every, 5 seconds. And we need to do that because of the annoyance, right? We have to sustain a Life Flask. Now, I'm pretty sure that the Hybrid Flask counts, but if it does not, we're going to have to run a Life Flask. And that Life Flask means we'll have to swap Ascendancies to the Master Surgeon node. And to swap to this, all you really need to unspec is either Master Toxicist or Nature's Boon. It's kind of your choice. This one gives us a little bit more defense, and this one gives us more offense. So I'll leave that to you. But we need to spec Master Surgeon if the Hollow Flask doesn't work. And then Progenesis, of course. If you can't run a Progenesis, I have this in the notes, but you're going to run a Quicksilver or a Silver, depending on what content you're running. I have Silver right here as the third one. This is assuming you're running like Simulacrums with this build. And we don't need a Quicksilver, obviously, for Simulacrums, so we're just running extra cast speed, extra movement speed with the Silver. If you're running like normal maps, you'll probably want to do a Quicksilver and a Silver here instead of the Progenesis, just for speed, to be honest. And then we're running a Topaz Flask of the Horsefly. This is for cast speed, this is for max lightning res, and then we're capping our max lightning res with Melting of the Flesh for 90 max res. Then we're running a Quartz Flask. This is mandatory. Also, the resistances are really, really hard to get in this build, so Perfect Roll Rainbow is kind of required. Okay, next, our jewels. Our jewels, we are very starved on jewels, but we're running a Militant Faith, which I'll get into in a second. We're running a Natural Affinity, which all these have substitutes and all that, so I'll actually get into that one in a second too. Melting of the Flesh is mandatory. This is for 90 max res. We're running a large 12 passive, or even 8 passive lightning damage jewel. This is because we're really passive starved. So we're running an 8 passive because we're not speccing all of them, as you can see. You can run like a 10, you can run a 9. Anything that's cheap that you find is always okay. Next, a Watcher's Eye. Currently I have a perfect one slotted in, but you're running a non-channeling skills have minus max to total mana cost while affected by clarity. This is pretty much required nowadays. The second best mod is gain life on hit, right? We're hitting Spark. We're hitting, I'm gonna say, I don't know, 40 times a second, 50 times a second probably. So the life gain on hit is massive for sustain. Next, we're running a small cluster jewel for Enduring Composure. This gives us 100% uptime on endurance charges, and we're always being hit because this is a standstill build, right? And if you're not being hit, you don't need endurance charges anyway, so that's a thing. Brandis Pack, this is coming back. It's called the new jewel, whatever it is, but you get the point. This is Brandis Pack from last league. Rational Doctrine, and this is where the Militant Faith comes in. So we're running a Rational Doctrine. I don't know how expensive these will be, but it's pretty much required if you want to be ailment immune. And if you don't want to be ailment immune, whatever, just drop this and get it as a later upgrade. But basically, with tattoos, we can easily get equivalent strength and intelligence along with blessing our mage blood. And then since we have Consecrated Ground lingers from that jewel, we can run a Militant Faith with reduced mana cost and elemental damage. Both of those are pretty much required. Elemental damage is about 20% more damage, so that's very worth. And then we're getting in the node Cloistered here on Shaper. And this gives us immunity to elemental ailments while we have Consecrated Ground, which lingers. So this is the same kind of playstyle as Inquisitor. But that's how we're getting Consecrated Ground immunity now that we're dropping our old boots for Inextricable Fate. Next, we have Unnatural Instinct. This is for Militant Faith. We're getting all these nodes. Next, we have Impossible Escape. And this is getting us Chaos Inoculation over here for Whispers of Doom, Atrophy, and Serpentine Spellslinger. We need the +1 curse because we have to run both Despair and Temp Chains. This is one of the things that changes with the Original Sin setup. You don't need Despair anymore. But without Original Sin, you need Despair. It's just too worth it. So get yourself one of these. And then a Thread of Hope. And this goes here. Get a whole bunch of worth it nodes. Out of all of them, the Thread of Hope is the least required, in my opinion. If you have less levels, you can spec out of this. If you have, you know, less money, whatever you want to do, you want to run a different jewel, that's fine. You can drop the Thread of Hope. But one thing you're going to run into if you do that is your intelligence is going to be really, really low. Because you get, I think, 2 nodes here. Yeah, int and int. And so you need to solve your intelligence if you do that. So that's the items. Now for the skills, we're running Despair on hit with the gloves. Ideally, you can get both Temp Chains and Despair, but obviously that's going to be extremely expensive / non-exist, so that's a thing. And yes, so for the other curse, we're going to go to a cast when damage taken setup. So this is Despair, and we have Temp Chains here. You can do it vice versa. You can get Temp Chains on hit on the gloves, and then Despair and cast when damage taken. If you're playing like T17s, this curse is pretty much always up, because we don't have any evasion, we don't have any dodge, any of that, so we always get hit, and so this is always up. Next for curses, we're running Malevolence, Arctic Armor, and Purity of Lightning. And what these do is Purity of Lightning's for max res. We put this in the helmet, so we get level 23, and we get +5, and that gives us 90, right? Arctic Armor, we're standing still, so we get a huge less fire damage and less fizz damage taken buff. We're running Malevolence, and this gives us Malevolence things, right? Just big damage. Another thing to note with Arctic Armor is that it gives us immunity to freeze, which this freeze is the only ailment that you really need to be immune to. And this gives us a little bit of a budget option. If you just drop elemental ailment immunity, like, it's not the end of the world. Build is still playable. Obviously, I'd recommend it, but it's not required. Here's our spark links. We're running Spark of the Nova, Awakened Elemental Focus, Deadly Ailments, Spell Echo, Unbound Elements, and Inspiration. Nothing's changed here. Well, I guess the one thing that has changed, that Inspiration was technically nerfed. It was changed to less mana cost, and so we have to do a lot of things to solve mana now, which is unfortunate. Next, we have Vitality and Clarity here. There's a whole bunch of different setups you can run. You can do a less level Clarity if you're running, since you're running this hollowed hybrid flask. It basically comes down to, are you running Soul Ascension? Because Soul Ascension, your cast speed gets so insane that your mana cost is just going to be absolutely through the roof every second, and so you need to basically solve mana, right? If you're running something else like the Explode Gloves, SNS, Gentle Touch, you don't need all these sources of mana reduction, you don't need all the regen. It's so much easier to solve. I'll leave that as an exercise to you because it'll be, easy compared to this. I have notes on all the different sources that you can get. Next, we have random, it's not even a 6-link. I think you could do, it's a 6 socket, but it's not a 6-link. We have Steel Skin on automation. We don't want Immortal Call anymore because we want Endurance Charge uptime. We have Enhance on Phase Run and Sigil of Power. Phase Run is automated, but Sigil of Power you cast manually. And this tech, we keep it level 1 with 23 quality. And with Enhance, at max stacks, this gives us 19% less damage taken. And it only requires like 200 mana to get going. So it ramps after like literally 4 seconds, 3 seconds, and we're at 20% less damage taken. This is massive. I would not skip this. When you're running a T17 or something, you're just standing still, so there's no reason not to use this. It also gives you flat lightning damage, so it's perfect. And then Blood Rage we just run for the frenzy charges. Another thing, you can run a corrupted Widow Hail for frenzy charge on kill as well. That's not enough alone though, you probably want both. Finally, in our gloves, we're running Haste with Guardian's Blessing and Raised Spectre, and Frost Blink. For Raised Spectre, we're getting a level 21 one, and we get 2 max Spectres. We're running Dark Marionettes because they respawn. So you'll have about, like, I want to be optimistic and say you'll have good uptime, but it's hard to know. It depends on what content you're running. I think it'll be pretty good, but like if you're running T17s that have like Cirrus ground, right? They're not going to be up. I'm not going to lie to you and say they're going to be up, but still, it's it's pretty good. Okay, for the tree, I went over the thread or the impossible escape. I went over the thread of hope. We're running a cluster here for nature's patience, and this gives us grasping vines while we're stationary, and this gives us up to 10% less damage taken. If you don't like this, you can run a different jewel. I recommend this. It's also a really cheap source of corrupted blood immunity, usually. We're running a Enduring Composure small cluster. I went over all the jewels, I'll just skip those. We're running Inveterate, obviously we're running the Poison Mastery for crit immunity. This is really nice to have. Also note that you have crit immunity on the boots. or up to 50% reduced extra damage taken. This is actually useful, even though we're immune to crits technically from this. If there's like a ghost mob or whatever, something that's not hittable so it can't be poisoned. For example, in the Abomination map, when you kill, like, Shav or whoever it is, they go immune and they can still crit you when they're like immune. So it's nice to have reduced extra crit damage taken. You can also get it on the body armor. You can get 50% there and then be totally immune to crits. If you do that, you can probably skip this whole wheel, but I recommend taking the enemy's poison, but you cannot deal crits if you don't have both sources. So then we're taking life, and we're also running the skills cost life mastery. Life regen is not an issue. We have 800 here, and we have like 2600 just from life gain on hit. And this is with like one mob around, so it's a stupid amount of recovery. We're running the suppression mastery here. Normal stuff. We're running the flask mastery here for flash charge on crit. And this flask charge, because we have an 8.4% crit chance, we obviously don't get that much, but we're hitting so much that we get a ton of flask charges just from this mastery. And it will always go to our life flask or our progenesis because we have 3 on mage blood. Next, we have skill effect duration, life, a jewel. Here's mana cost stuff, more max life, and then we're running elemental overload obviously for poison damage. And we're running the damage over time mastery stuff up here for damage. Okay, now I'll go over the notes. Right, so here are the notes for the build. One of the main problems you're going to have to solve is the mana sustain, right? You have a mana cost per second of about 60 to 70 at max ramp, and this is with a minus mana cost clarity eye. So I would recommend either, running that by default and then running a life gain on hit jewel, or not jewel, a ring, right? And then I go over, here are the other options for your watcher side. You can get damage over time multiplier with malevolence, faster ailments with malevolence, unaffected by bleeding, a few other ones. And then if you just run a minus mana cost clarity eye, you need the life gain on hit on the ring. That's mandatory for the build. You can see it gives us 2600 life gain on hit per second. So that's mandatory. Stat issues. So we have a stat requirement on strength and intelligence of 159. And just looking at the tree, you don't get enough anywhere. So I'm running currently a veiled plus strength and intelligence on the ring. Other sources you can probably get it on are the cluster jewels. You can get it on the helmet. You can get it on the weapon as like in exchange for the crafted mod. You can get it here, either one of these 2 nodes. And then yeah, you shouldn't really have all much of a problem with that, but those are the solutions if you need to do that. Resistances, we're extremely res starved, so we're running a perfect rainbow flask with mage blood. We're currently running resistances on the quiver. We're running all that stuff. Also tattoos. So on this setup, we're running a few prod speed, a few suppression around here somewhere. You're gonna just have to take my word for it, maybe. Here's suppression. So a few of these are suppression, a few of them are prod speed. You can swap these with cold res too if you need to. Just keep that in mind. Yeah, like I said, you can run cold res tattoos on those, and then you can swap the mage bane too. Mage bane here gives me currently 100% spell suppression, or plus 11 or plus 10 or whatever it is, yeah. And then obviously if you're unspecking some of these prod speed nodes for tattoos, you're getting more dexterity and thus more spell suppression. Finally, yeah, I would recommend experimenting in PoE before you commit to save money and all that, right? Rational doctrine. So you can you basically need your strength to be higher than your intelligence to get the one benefit from it. Let me find the item. So if your strength is your highest attribute, you get consecrated ground. That's the one you really need, but profane ground is also good because it gives increased damage taken and it gives increased crit chance. Crit chance is good because of this mastery. And then so yeah, at best you want them to be balanced, but if you can't do that, just get your strength highest. Finally, you can run a corrupted 3 Flask Mage Blood for this setup, but it will be awkward to balance the strength and intelligence, because with a corrupted Mage Blood, you cannot bless the strength. So you might have to go with just your strength being higher than your intelligence for that setup. Places to cut down cost. A bunch of them. So Thread of a Hope, I kind of went over that, but you will have intelligence issues if you drop it. I would recommend just specking this node and you should be okay. Awakened Spell Echo is pretty much just vanity. I think it's, I don't even know what it gives. It's not all that much. Just drop it if you don't have the money. And obviously use normal Spell Echo. Progenesis, just run a Quicksilver, a Silver, anything you want for damage or speed, or, you know, you choose. Defiance of Destiny, it's not necessary at all, especially after the nerf. We have so much recovery that we don't even need it, to be honest. So I would recommend getting a +1 all skill gems amulet with some resistances, life, and minus mana cost if you can. The +1 all skill gems, like I said earlier, helps you with your levels on Purity of Lightning. So you can get 90 max res easier. And yeah, you can drop the +2 AoE mod on the helmet for crafted hybrid life. You will lose 1 max res, which is about 10% LE reduction, but it's not the end of the world. This is assuming you're running Defiance of Destiny. You can drop the helical ring for a second well-crafted ring. The helical base is going to be probably pretty expensive this patch, just because of the fractured change where you can't fix them if you like brick the fracture. So more than likely, we probably start out with a well-crafted ring versus a perfect helical. You can drop the recoup on rings in general to save money, or you can drop dot multi. Obviously, you're just dropping damage, but it's way easier to craft without these mods. You can drop the corruption on boots, currently running +1 max endurance charges. This is for elemental resistances and LE damage reduction. Oh, actually, I don't think it gives resistances anymore. But yeah, this just gives us LE damage reduction, which is huge. But, you know, if you can't get that, don't worry about it. And then I talked about the curse stuff. You can get either Soul Ascension with Temp Chains and Despair, or just Temp Chains, or just Despair, or none. And if you can't get either, that's okay. You just need to run Blood Rage, or drop Blood Rage, and you can fit in the 3-link cast when damage taken, Temp Chains, and Despair. I went over the Watcher's Eye stuff. Implicits on Lightning Coil. So in this setup, I'm running +2/+2. Obviously, that's perfect, but it's expensive. So valid options are +1 gems, +2 projectile, and +2 duration. And other good ones are +1 max res. Obviously, that you can drop some other stuff. Crit damage reduction. This is good for enemies that are like the shadows, like I talked about earlier, like Shavron. You can drop the veiled flat damage on the quiver. It's about 15% to 20% more damage because it scales massively from Widow Hail. I'm talking about this adds cold damage and adds lightning damage. It scales to the moon, but if you can't get that, don't worry about it. Drop Rational Doctrine. I mentioned that earlier. You can just drop Element Immunity. You can drop the Impossible Escape. This is +1 curse and good damage, but they're not necessary. You can run Mage Bane instead of some of the suppression tattoos, sorry. And then Militant Faith. So for Militant Faith, I'll just go over this real quick. If you're running Rational Doctrine, you need the Cloistered node for elemental ammon immunity. And if you can't get that because it's for some reason it's too expensive or it's not available, get the Cloistered node but on a different base for the Militant Faith. I would get reduced mana cost and then a different first mod. If you can get like Aura Effect, I guess that's pretty good. Anything else other than the increased L damage, even though the elemental damage is a huge multiplier. For Natural Affinity, a lot of people just don't like this item. If you don't like the playstyle, don't run it. Either, you know, you can drop this jewel, or you can just like unspec these nodes for strength and then put them somewhere else, like more max life or more damage. And then if you're low level than 100, either drop the skill affection duration wheel here, or you can drop this whole setup, the Thread of Hope setup, or you can drop one of these notes like Atrophy or Serpentine Spellslinger. I think that's it for the notes here. So let me quickly go over how to craft some stuff. The quiver. So you want to get Fractured +2 Pierce on a Feathered quiver. This is for the prod speed. And then you want to do the suffixes first. So you're going to get Essence prod speed until you get high tier Chaos res, or Essence prod speed, and then you lock suffixes Reforged Chaos for T2 or T1. You don't need T1 because you can see I'm way overcapped on Chaos Res without it. And this is literally just from the Widow Hail pretty much. Finally, you want to do can't roll attack mods, slam, and then until you get high max life, so T2, T1 probably. And if you don't hit that, you can't do annul with the can't roll attack mods. You have to do a suffixes can't be changed and then annul, unfortunately. But until you hit a high tier life, right? And then you do multi-mod, suffixes can't be changed, Veiled Orb, and you hope to hit the suffixes can't be changed mod. And then it's pretty much a guaranteed unveil for the flat cold lightning damage, and then you want to craft on your last mod. The helmet, essence spam for res, you can do, lock suffixes, reforge fire, reforge cold. You can do eldritch currency to slam on high res, all that stuff. And then I started with a fractured life base, and that's probably the best nowadays. And you can do a lock suffixes Veiled Orb for the +2 AoE. Make sure to block, I think it's Fizz damage reduction is the best. Craft of Exile is actually wrong on this. The data mined weights are wrong. So make sure to craft Fizz damage reduction, and it's like a 1 in 2 to 1 in 3 to unveil +2 AoE. The rings. So these are pretty difficult to craft. For this one, you're going to want to... How do you do this? So you would start out with either fractured damage over time multiplier, or you just kind of hope for the best and you would do essence spam. I think they're insanity or whatever it is for plus the damage over time multiplier until you hit T1 life, and then you would do lock suffixes. Essence damage over time multiplier spam until you hit recoup, right? T1 recoup. Then you would annul for an open suffix. Lock suffixes reforge caster for T1 cast speed, that's a 1 in 3. And then you would do lock suffixes Veiled Orb for max life, and then you would craft on minus mana cost. For the other one, this life gain on hit one, I would probably, until you have a ton of money, drop the essence damage over time, and then just do pristine fossils on a Shaper Vermilion ring until you hit huge max life, and all that stuff. And you want cast speed ideally. I think honestly you would just go for huge recoup and huge life gain on hit, and then probably you hit life as well because you're running pristine fossils. And then if you can get cast speed and all that stuff, that's perfect. But this one, you need the life gain on hit. I'm sure might be a better way to craft this, but you could probably figure that out. There's also recombinators, keep that in mind. You could probably recom this item pretty easily. I don't know much about recombinators, so I'm not gonna just lie to you and give you bad methods, but yeah. That's pretty much it. The large cluster drill, you want to fracture it if you want to get a really good one. Otherwise, you just cast a reforge or attack reforge. I don't know which one's better. Or even speed reforge until you hit 35 effect and 3%. And then any other 2 mods. Ideally, you get max res and life though. Finally, the armor one. You really just want Enduring Composure. If you hit max life, all res, that's good too, because you're only taking 1 node. So yeah, that's pretty much it. If you have any questions, leave a comment or join the Discord. It'll be linked below. There's a few channels in there. Feel free to tag me, whatever. Put your POB and what you're having questions with or any of that. Yeah, and like I said, I'm going to be trying to stream more. So if you want to check out my Twitch, I'd really appreciate it. And yeah, leave a like on the video. Thanks, guys. See ya.